Hi there, it's Paulie here. So, I have a strange obsession with World War II naval games. I have told you some anecdotes of this before. I have found a great set of rules. This is Nimitz. These are by Sam Mustafa. Honor Games. Honor Games have their own website. It's well worth taking a look at everything Sam does. Sam is a great games designer and a really nice guy. But Nimitz is his World War II naval conflict rules, and these are really good. I've played a lot of games, naval games, and you'll get these kind of stick in the mud players. So I live in Perth. Perth is a navy town. I'm an old tank driver from from Victoria. Light Horse and Royal Australian Armoured Regiment. So under normal circumstances, no, Navy's not my thing. But when I've played here, the Navy's their thing, all right. But to them, World War II Navy is like battling it out, duking it out with mighty ships with mighty guns. And so, when you've got a points thing, I'll like, what are we playing? World War II? Yeah. Pacific? Yeah. What year? 1943. Great. I'll look at the points and I'll buy a carrier force, okay? All right, so what do we got? Okay, well, I can sport probably a carrier division of 2 carriers. Okay, better get the anti-aircraft cruiser in there to protect them. I'll need my radar picket ships. I'll need some cruisers to back up the picket line, and I'm going to have a big gun ship to just sort of be in general support. Good, that's my task force. Where these guys will buy, these guys will go off and buy the Yamato. It's like, oh, how quaint. Nimitz, on the other hand, handles all of it. It handles surface gunships, and it handles carrier stuff, and it does it simply. A thing with most naval rules is that for some reason they tend to get really, really bogged down in mathematics and charts and tables and trying to really make the science of this thing work, but it loses the game. This thing retains all of that by rolling it over into pretty simple game mechanics. So the game's the thing, but the game has the flavor and the feel and is taking, the science into account. So the basic game of this is set 39 to 43 is when they're setting this. They've got things, if you want to do the 1944 Pacific campaign, they've got the extras to do it, but as they say, at this period, Japanese forces are so massively outnumbered and the tech gap has suddenly become so broad that it's not a very fun game for the Japanese, but you can play it. Here's the things that you need to do it. What you've got is a set of rules that are designed to be played on a tabletop. It's divided imaginarily into kind of 1-foot squares, and a typical game starts with each fleet starting off in diagonally opposed 1-foot squares, steaming towards each other. Okay, get playing. There is a point system that allows you to purchase your different ships. Now, the ships are split into battleships, cruisers, and destroyers. There's 3 different streams. Within their class, a typical ship has 10 boxes of structure. The last 3 of them are red, which lets you know that that ship is in a critical state. It is crippled, and things like its fire control and its flak and these sorts of things now use a much worse rating, and the ship becomes slower. Ships that are particularly big or particularly very, very, very well constructed in that class will have 12 structure boxes. So a battleship, 10 boxes. The Yamato will have 12 boxes. Some of the older kind of World War I rollovers and so on, which are not as well compartmentalized, not as big, not as butch, they will have only 9 structure boxes rather than the 10. They'll be smaller. Likewise for cruisers. A typical cruiser, 10 boxes. A really butch kind of heavy cruiser, that's going to have 12. Light cruisers, going to have about 9. Destroyers have way less. I think they've got about 6 boxes as a standard, and they only have 2 crippled structure boxes. Everyone's also got like 3 flotation boxes. Destroyers have 2, which are used essentially for tracking either torpedo damage, or if you get flooding from bomb hits and critical hits and so on, your flotation goes down. So damage tracking, very simple, crossing it off with a pencil on a sheet. Your guns, yes, they're all listed, and essentially number of tubes, and whether they are classed as heavy guns, which have a long range, or lighter artillery, which has a shorter range, and they've got their striking power. Each ship will have its own individual little chart which shows what kind of penetration it's got at different ranges depending on a dice roll. So you're firing at long range with heavy guns and you roll a 6. If you've got a ship that's basically kitted out with 14-inch guns, it'll give you these are the penetration values that you'll get. If it's a thing with 15-inch guns or 16-inch guns, they will be different. So the flavour shines through, and all the secondary guns that are in casemates and so on are actually they're not as flexible as your turret guns. Some weapons are tagged as essentially being low quality, so casemate guns are low quality. German torpedoes, surprisingly, are low quality. Early war American torpedoes are also complete shite. Japanese torpedoes, of course, long lance. They are the long lance torpedoes. They do extra damage and so on. Your torpedoes are rated for each navy on whether they're unreliable or not, but also they'll do different damage. And ships have a different fire control rating, varies from ship to ship, sometimes navy to navy. So very, very simple, but it really gives a cool flavour for each ship. Their armour and so on is listed down there. Now, when you are wanting to fire, what you do is you look at the range and then you figure out how many tubes can fire. So if he's in the front quadrant, like of a battleship, which has 2 turrets, each with 2 guns in them, fantastic. 4 tubes are firing. But when the ship ding 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 swings broadside on, with all 4 turrets, each with 2 guns, yes, you're firing with 8 tubes. So these represent, each turn represents 5 to 7 minutes of actual combat. So we're not rolling for individual hits for guns. Since even a battleship can fire off a minute between broadsides, we're looking at 5, 6, 7 broadsides going off here. So what we're simulating here is the chance of landing damage on another ship over half a dozen salvos over time, and that at least 1 or 2 of those are going to score hits. But it could be, when you get a good damage roll, it might mean that this guy's taken multiple hits. Or you've taken 1 hit, which is, started fires and done really cool stuff. But that's what we're simulating. Likewise, when you fire torpedoes, you're firing a spread. The number of torpedoes in the spread is giving you a chance of hitting. And that's representing the chance that maybe one of these landed, given the size of the spread. Or if it's really good damage, maybe a couple of them scored hits. So, so we're not worried about the incredible minuate of doing charts and going to a slide drill and 15 minutes later you've got it all sorted out. Good, now roll your percentile dice. Miss. All right, now roll for the other 12 guns on the ship. The differentiation between those structures, yes, they are the same kind of structure values for each of these ships. But the thing is, the guns on those light cruisers aren't going to be able to penetrate and do damage into the battleships. Is the difference there. So that's how the differences show. When you roll, there is a little critical chart that you roll on. If you've scored damage, you can do extras like put turrets out of action, destroy rangefinders so that their fire control becomes worse, get extra damage, e.g. you've started fires, etc. And there is a second chart for the advanced game for bombs, which do different damage. Pretty simple ranges, like it's 12 inches for short range guns, it's 24 inches for long range guns. As I said, all these massive ranges that you got on the guns at the time were largely theoretical. They did not tend to open fire on each other at those ranges because they actually only carried relatively limited ammunition, and that was almost a waste of time. So yes, these are the effective ranges. Likewise, torpedoes are like a 12-inch range. Long lance Japanese torpedoes are 24-inch range, but their accuracy at that range is utter shite. Complete waste of time. And you don't reload torpedoes during a battle because some ships did carry reloads, but that is something we have to break out a crane and actually open up armored storage containers, and it's going to take you in good flat weather, it might take you an hour to reload those torpedoes. So not in the course of a brisk naval engagement. In the campaign game, yes. So yes, so you're whittling away at each other, doing the damage, blazing away. You can turn and you can run and you can fight. There are some cool little rules for if you're fighting at night and so on. You want to do your whole Savo Island Iron Bottom Sound thing. Ding! It's all in there. The basic game covers everything. Then Nimitz, which is that tabletop game, rolls over into a cool kind of campaign system. And that's Halsey. And this is a broader campaign system, but it's still designed for basically an afternoon's play between friends. This isn't something you could do a big thing. You could do a huge campaign that does last you as a games group weeks and weeks, but these are designed so you can play a cool kind of campaign for a day's play with some friends. This wider one has aircraft in it. You've got a campaign map. You'll be moving from sector to sector in the campaign map. You've got land bases which can send out flying boats. Flying boats are just simply, they don't worry about the range on them because the range of these things is absurd. You send them out into a sector to look in those sectors. If you find someone, you can actually stick flying boats on to shadow them, which increases the chance of actually guiding your own fleet units or your own air units into contact. If you move fleets into an area where there is another, an enemy fleet, you have to roll to actually contact them because these do represent hundreds of square miles of sea area, so you can miss each other. So you can send in airstrikes and not find the target you were looking for. If you found them by sending out like individual scout aircraft from your aircraft carriers, you can send out, which is why torpedo bombs and so on are often called scouts, because you do send one or two of them out to search sectors and so on. When you find them, you can put flying boats on to shadow them. You can guide your guys in, so it becomes more certain. Your air attacks, they're done really nicely. Carriers are free. You do not pay for carriers. You're paying for all the other ships, but no, ding, carriers are free. You pay for the air groups that are on the carriers. So, right, I'm buying an Akagi. Good. An Akagi has 12 aircraft in its air group. Buy the air group. Right, you go down and say, well, if I am a major Japanese fleet unit, major carriers are allowed to have the experienced pilot zeros in the early years of the war, so I can get the really cool kind of ace pilot zeros and the more experienced, dive bomber guys and so on who will get a bonus. Smaller auxiliary carriers in the Japanese, you're going to have to use the guys who weren't so skilled. And in later years, we got the recruits coming in, but so you purchase these and that is your points value. The carriers do have a points value listed, but that's for victory points. If you do sink the carrier, that's what you gain in victory for doing it. But the designer decided, look, it's just not fair, having to pay for the ship and pay for the air, and it just becomes too expensive. And we want the air in there. We want it in there. It's a major thing. So essentially, you send out your scout forces, searching air search for fleets. You send your fleet units out. You might think, hey, I'll just put everything in one giant clump. On the other hand, you might want to put little destroyer or cruiser groups out there, again, searching for the guy. Ooh, but you might want some cruiser groups whose job is to shore up that line in case they bump into his guys. And, I've sent a flotilla of 4 or 5 destroyers out hunting for him. And he screened it with some light cruisers. Oh, yeah? Well, I got a light cruiser group that's there to deal with that. Or I got a heavy cruiser group that's designed to sweep that away. So, the tactics come in. You can repair vessels to a certain extent. Submarine activity comes in. Again, submarines are sent to operate in different sea areas, and if fleets come in, they see if they contact. If they do, the destroyer screen has a chance of screening the other units from the submarines, and you can do casualties to the submarines. If not, the submarines then will do their damage to you. So nice and simple. Again, air attacks. If the guy has air capabilities and you've attacked him, you roll to see whether he can scramble interceptors and so on. If he doesn't have interceptors deliberately launched and hovering there anyway. You match off interceptors against interceptors. If there are more defending interceptors than attacking, then those extra attackers, they basically can tear into the attack aircraft. Once that mighty dogfight is over, the any defending interceptors that haven't been, if haven't been chased off. Extra damage then goes through to the incoming attack aircraft. So the best defense against incoming attack aircraft is actually to have interceptors up. Flak, there's ratings on vessels for their flak. You can pick a vessel. Not all vessels can contribute defensive flak to others. Some places, like the Japanese, had it like an individual defense doctrine where vehicles would scatter and kind of look after themselves, whereas Americans would glue anti-aircraft cruisers and so on close to priority targets, and they would use their long-range flak capabilities to defend. But flak is basically long-range large guns, and those are can do some damage. They don't do a ton of damage. One of the main things is essentially disrupting attacks. It's rare to bring aircraft down, but it is fairly common to damage some and distract and make the attack run a complete waste of time because there's so much going on that the pilot loses. So anyway, you roll for flak, and then yahoo, in goes the attack. Now, attacking aircraft have to run the gauntlet of the short-range guns, but these actually don't vary much from ship to ship. Essentially, any incoming aircraft just has a chance of being shot down as it comes straight towards defending machine guns and 20 mils and 40 mils and so on. They're like bump, 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 trying to get it. And then it does its attack, and you check for damage, etc. So it's actually a nice, simple air system. It gets a result. It does it well. It feels dramatic. Down, 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 down. First wave, dive. You are having the time of your life, doing the dogfights and sending the dive bombers in, and yahoo! Launch those torpedoes. Then try and get the hell back to base. You've got, as a campaign turn goes by, you do operations, which are operations include things like rearming and refueling airwaves, dispatching airwaves, receiving airwaves back on board. It's also used for sending out ships, moving, etc., etc. So as you do operations, you roll, and you're basically rolling to see if the day is over. It's a random roll, and as the initiative passes back and forth, you each roll, and eventually you're going to make a dice score which takes that roll over the critical number, and that's it. That day's operations are over. You now switch to night. You switch to the next period. A day is split into, I think, 3 periods, and one of which is night. So there's kind of a morning, a midday, and night. And slow-moving vessels like merchant ships or slow merchant ships and some very slow support vessels and any ships that you've got that are crippled, they only move on the campaign map, bonk, at night. Everything else can move in each period. So the slow stuff is indeed slow stuff. So it's got rules for unloading and landing. So if you've got scenarios where, for instance, that's it, you guys are trying to land on Guadalcanal, and you've got a screening force that has to protect it, and so you're doing the invasion, and the other force, the opposing force, they are trying to stop that invasion. Here's your naval task force to get through screen and break all that up. You can play all that. That's all done. So it's a really accessible game. It gets you in there, it gets you playing, it gets results. I've got so many World War II kind of Navy games here where all the naval stuff is just sodding agony. We're rearming, we're refueling, I've got to rotate this one, I've got these ones on the elevators, I've got these ones on the deck, I've got these ones in the forward hangar. It's like, no. It's just, I'm spending an operation to ready. If I get attacked while I'm readying, then I don't get to scramble fighters the way I could. And so, the vulnerabilities are all there. The paperwork isn't. Thank you, Sam. Thank you. This game has very, very extensive online resources. So there are lists for every single navy and all of their ships. The designer is very clear that these ships are a snapshot of that vessel as it was for a specific year. Like he's taking a lot of them for like 1941. And he's aware that later on many of these vessels got refits. In some cases, he has got the refit versions of those ships. So if you're specifically playing this after this ship got refitted for the Pacific and therefore got more ack put on it or whatever, then good, that'll be down there. Oh, look, it's the Japanese after they've lost all of their aircrew. They're now trying to turn absolutely everything that floats into a carrier. There's some surprising cute little surprises in there. So there are things like the Japanese seaboat, flying boat tenders. They're all in there, and so in the campaign game, if you've got a naval task force that has like one of these flying boat tenders with it, then they are giving you a bonus to scouting into regions around you and so on. So, okay, that's nice. Oh, good. Oh, I might want to spend some money on stuff that doesn't just fling off guns and torpedoes and planes that shoot people. I might want to start adding eyes to the fleet. Likewise, little things. If you're in the campaign game, you are the Italian fleet. The mighty frogmen on their chariots can start doing things to people's harbours. Unpleasant things, deeply unsavoury things. But that sort of stuff is all in there. So there's some cute little sort of flavors and interesting things, and so it's a nice set of rules. It really is. All those online resources are free. There's also a whole bunch of campaigns there online, and Sam's pretty good at adding to that sort of stuff, so that will all be there. So look, as far as World War II naval rules go, I think these are absolutely my preferred set. You'll get a really good game out of them. It's got the flavour of the period without bogging you down in hundreds of dice rolls and mathematics. The big gun ships are fun as you're running around shooting big gun ships, but meanwhile your fast tearaway cruisers and destroyers are having a time all of their own. The air attacks and everything are all in there. Torpedoes, long lance torpedoes, yeehaw. You can have destructive fun with floaty things to your heart's content. And I think like the GHQ kind of their range kind of models, like a battleship's probably about 4 inches. That's probably the size you're looking at with this, but you don't need miniatures at all. You can just play this with counters and have a great time at zero cost. You can just run that stuff out. In fact, if you take his free Navy lists, there are top-down silhouettes for all of these vessels. You could just print that up on the card and cut, and you've got a Navy right there. You can do it. Do you realize there's some Japanese cruisers that have got 40 torpedo tubes on them? Yeehaw! There's fish in the water. So look, I have to say, this is one of those games that after I read the rules, I got really excited, immediately began shopping on the GHQ website. 1 or 2 Japanese carriers couldn't hurt. And you've got to have one of the little ones too. Everyone's got to have a Yamato. Ooh! But if you've got those, you've got to have some Americans to face them down with, etc. And you also tend to find yourself watching a loop series of DVDs. Well, I'm going to have to watch Tora, and Midway, and then the other Midway. I've got to watch The Cruel Sea now. Sink the Bismarck. Yes, you'll watch them all. So, yes, I think these are a inspiring set of rules because they make you want to play. You can just leap in, you can do it one player versus one player, group against group, mighty fleets versus mighty fleets, or just small flotillas versus small flotillas. You can have a whale of a time. Anyway, go out and get it. It's on Sam's website, which is Honor Games. And it's worth taking a look at the other stuff he's got there. He has a great array of games up there. He really is one of the best miniatures games designers out there. And is always ready to answer questions and so on. So a good guy. Anyway, go get hold of the game. If you like the reviews, by all means, like, subscribe, and all that cool jazz. Find me on Patreon so I can keep finding some of these rules for them, and I can read through them so that you don't have to. And I can tell you and go and buy them and have a good time. Anyway, cheers everyone, and keep playing.